It appears Facebook CEO Mark Zuckerberg made campaign staffing recommendations to Mayor Pete, and Senator Warren's statements on lobbying may not line up with her record.
We're back with Democratic strategist Roger Fisk and Capitol Hill reporter at the Daily Caller, Henry Rogers.
So we've got some interesting reporting here from Bloomberg. This is Facebook CEO Mark Zuckerberg made personal recommendations for several potential hires to Pete Buttigieg's presidential campaign. I mean, obviously kind of a fraught thing to do in this day and age, Roger. Is this just, is this just business as usual? Or maybe is that the problem, is that this is business as usual? What does this look like to you?
I would assume that it's some kind of Harvard connection thing or something.
Right.
I don't find it tremendously troubling. I think, if to look at it in just kind of a beltway context, you probably should have done it through some kind of intermediary or something like that.
It's like, why are you doing this?
It's just, I think, to have one's kind of overt fingerprints on it. And then, it's interesting to look at it from, the Zuckerberg side, but also look at it from the Buttigieg side, which would be, I would almost want some kind of documentation or paper trail saying, this is not appropriate for you to contact us about matters like this. Yeah. Please go through boom, 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 or here's our law firm or whatever. But lay down something very clear as part of the record, so you can point to it and say we weren't being overtly influenced by blah blah blah. It's not rocket science.
Yeah, I agree. It's just baffling to me that the Facebook CEO is recommending staff.
So they went to school together.
Right.
They were they had mutual friends together, and then years later they meet and now they're friends.
Yeah.
It's interesting. I mean, that's a serious concern for a lot of people to have the CEO of Facebook. I mean, the biggest social media platform.
It's a country.
Literally. Yeah.
It is essentially a country to be best friends
and recommending staff,
good friends,
staffing up,
and have staffing up with a presidential frontrunner. I mean, at this point, I mean, contender. Buttigieg is moving his way up, but still, I think that's something to be worried about. The bias could really come into effect on Facebook and vice versa.
And it gives the right another chance to claim some false liberal bias at Facebook. When if you go
100%.
If you go right now to Facebook, the top 10 stories, there's something about the Dallas Cowboys, and the other 9 are right-wing posts. So there's the top trending pieces on Facebook. Facebook has become a right-wing cesspool, but the conservatives are extremely good at working the refs and be and telling Mark Zuckerberg, look, it's unfair. All of these liberals out in the Bay Area, they're against us. You need to juice us on the algorithm.
Is currency on the right? I mean, nowadays you've got to be a victim somehow.
You don't make as much money off Facebook as you guys think. Former Daily Caller people can tell you that quite well. I will say though, I am baffled by it generally that Zuckerberg did not have the wherewithal to think that this is a bad look.
General counsel, counsel to general counsel. You guys work it out. And
maybe it's just the brazenness of this, which I think.
There is no real self. That he's kryptonite politically.
Yeah, he really doesn't get that.
Which is my point about who was sitting at the desk on the Buttigieg end that said this is not this is not moving past me until we figure out how to deal with this appropriately.
So if anything, it just tells us about judgment on both sides. Another interesting story from the New York Times, Roger. Your former boss, John Kerry. Many other establishment Democrats, so John Kerry, Eric Holder, people are floating Michelle Obama, Michael Bloomberg, all these other people. They're saying, we gotta get in this race. The Democratic establishment says Joe Biden doesn't have what it takes. I mean, did these people really think that they could win a Democratic primary right now? I don't think there's a chance in hell.
Before you even get into the personalities, I think there's just a calendar reality, right? I mean, in the sense of just actually making the ballot and some of the filing deadlines and things like that. I don't know, it would, maybe there's a dollar amount that it would take to grease the skids and get it all done at this point, but I can't see someone, honestly going out and unless they way back in the spring got some kind of very surreptitious plan to get ballot access, and then they just sat on it for a while.
I feel
which would have had to been extremely complex, and so I just don't see it happening. I just don't see it happening.
It's just a dream that never died. How many times are we going to read this stupid article, right? Centrists freak out that centrists aren't. It's well, maybe that's why maybe you're losing for a reason.
The only person on that list, and I agree with Roger completely. I don't think there's enough time.
Realistically,
I don't think there's not. Right. Realistically, no. But the only person on that list that I think could do is Michelle Obama. I think if she were to hop in the race, that name recognition and everything would just soar her to the top.
I think you're right.
And what this tells us, and it goes to the story we're going to talk about next, is that a lot of the viewers of this show think that I'm crazy when I say that the establishment.
They know I'm crazy.
No, you're crazy. Then they're right. But when I say that the establishment is not actually in the tank for Elizabeth Warren and that they're just toying with you because they hate Bernie so much, people are like, oh, you're crazy. No, she is the establishment's horse that they're going to ride all the way. Oh, yeah? Well, then she's now the front runner. Why aren't they getting behind Elizabeth Warren? Because the whole thing was a game and y'all got played.
This is an astute point that you made in our post-debate coverage. And I actually generally think it's right, which is they still look at her as anathema, but less anathema than Bernie. And I think that is something that we should consider. And this goes to the next story that we're going to talk about here, which is Elizabeth Warren and her lobbying record. This is an interesting story I saw being highlighted in Politico. It says that it's not like she actually hates lobbyists. That her Senate record doesn't necessarily match her campaign rhetoric. What do you make of this story, Roger? I mean, is this just purity tests that are being exerted on somebody? Because I mean, if you do look at a Bernie Sanders and you are on the progressive left, then this does seem like something that could be troubling that she has worked and has done dealing with these people when she was in office.
Well, one of my frustrations of many is that we paint with very broad brushes. So lobbyists, and I used to work in the Senate and things like that. You know, lobbyists can be approaching you advocating for legislation to feed hungry kids. Lobbyists can be approaching you to keep mining runoff from being dumped into the rivers, which the current administration just removed the law that banned them from doing so. So my point in that is that there's a 360-degree spectrum of lobbyists, right? So it's not completely inconceivable that someone sat down with the lobbyist for the YMCAs or the community hospitals in their district or anything else. And also, when you go out and run for president, you should be presenting your version or your vision of the future. And if she wants to move towards a place where lobbyists have less impact, that should not at the same time restrain her from meeting with lobbyists that represent interests that are aligned with where she's at philosophically. I don't see a thing there.
And some of the few lobbyists that were willing to speak on the record in that article are interesting. And the top one was Camden Fine from the Independent Community Bankers Association, which is revealing about Elizabeth Warren's politics, because it's true that she does work with the Independent Community Bankers Association. She tries to cleave them off from the American Banking Association, from Wall Street, to say, like, no, we're okay with banking. Like, but what we want is we want boring banking. We want people who are making mortgages and holding on to those mortgages. And so she tries to drive a wedge between the small bankers and the big bankers. Meanwhile, Wall Street loves trying to use the community bankers as kind of their shield.
This Trojan horse.
So I think this is a good point. But Henry, I mean, the way I look at it is like, if she's going to set all these purity tests, I mean, like, we're going to end this, we're going to end this, and this is just ammunition, right? This is like, it's like you're trying to run as if you got this crystal clear record on the, not taking big money, then you are, then it's like you're trying to set these standards, which basically that Bernie said from the very beginning, but it's not necessarily something that you've lived by the entire time. Now, your point is well taken. I'm not saying that it isn't valid.
And it's a difference with Bernie.
And there is a difference, but that difference matters, and actually it's ammunition from both the left and the right.
She's running, though, on a message of raising taxes for, like, lobbyists, 75%, which is massive.
Yeah.
And here we have an article that comes out with at least 7 lobbyists who she's met with, and they're all saying, I don't think she has a problem with lobbying at all. She was more than welcome to meet with us about this issue or this issue or this issue. And I completely agree with Roger. Not every lobbyist is a bad person. They're not bad. They're lobbying for important issues that matter to all of us, and that that really.
But if you're going to take a position,
if you're going to take a position that you are anti-lobbying, that all lobbyists are bad people, et cetera, you're going to get burned when it comes to stuff
and this
like
is something that Crystal talks a lot about on the show. I have to represent her since she's sick, which is that it really is like a theory of political change thing, where what Crystal would say is like, look, like, it might be valid. She would hear your point. She was like, but this shows that this is Elizabeth Warren is about change from within, institutionalism, and Bernie Sanders is very much like a revolution from the outside coming into the government. I'm probably more replicative of a Trump-like phenomenon. So I would say this just kind of highlights what that is. But we can't get into that today.
Crystal would be right.
She would probably be right. Thank you guys for joining us. We really appreciate it. Thanks for your analysis.
Thank you.
Tomorrow on Rising, Florida Congressman Francis Rooney, he weighs in on the ongoing impeachment fight.
And writer Matt Karp describes the stakes in the 2020 election and contrasts the Sanders and Warren presidency.
We'll see you tomorrow.
See you.